The popular history of World War II communications tends to focus on the big nation-level code-breaking efforts: Enigma, Purple, the race to read your opponent's diplomatic mail. But for every high-level cipher broken at Bletchley Park, there were 1,000 tactical signals sent and received just a few thousand yards behind the lines that were far more fragile and often just as decisive. The reality is that by 1942, a highly skilled signals intelligence unit was not just a support element. It was a priority target, a weapon system in its own right. And when one of these units was destroyed, the effect on a field army's combat effectiveness was immediate and catastrophic. This is a story about that fragility. It's about why a German commander's ambition, a stretch of coast at Tel El Aissa, and a collection of commandeered civilian vans in North Africa changed how modern armies think about intelligence. It reveals a fundamental truth about modern warfare. The moment you transmit, you create a vulnerability. And if the other side is listening, your radio wave becomes a homing beacon. The intercept unit was not just gathering intelligence, it was itself a high-valued target. On the night of July 9, 1942, the men of the German Nachrichtenfernsehsendung Aufklärung Company 621, Signals Intercept Company 621, settled into their positions near the railway siding at Tel El Aissa. To an outside observer, they looked like a nondescript gaggle of buses and wireless lorries, a collection of civilian vehicles that seemed out of place so close to the front. But inside those vans, Captain Alfred Seebohm's men were listening to the lifeblood of the British 8th Army. They had the intercept equipment, the English-speaking cryptanalysts, and the position. Located just behind the Italian Sabratha division, they enjoyed uninterrupted reception from Cairo, Middle East headquarters, and the Allied armoured units. Their work was so efficient that Rommel often had decrypted British signals in his hands before the intended British commanders had even finished reading them. Seebohm knew his position was exposed. His subordinates warned him that Allied reconnaissance flights were, a bit too interested in that specific area. But Seebohm was ambitious. He had been accused of withdrawing too hastily at Mersa Matruh, and some felt he was seeking to prove his nerve by pushing his unit as far forward as possible, hoping to deliver better results. Still, he ignored the risk. The unit had only 5 machine pistols and 6 light machine guns to defend its 200 men and 40 vehicles. They were not a fighting formation. They were a listening post. And they were sitting less than 5,000 meters from the Australian 2nd 24th Battalion. At first light on July 10th, the Australian 26th Brigade launched a limited counter-offensive. Under a heavy artillery barrage, they swept through the inexperienced Italian division. The Italians fled. And in the ensuing 90-minute firefight, the Australians overran Seebohm's position before he could react. Some vehicles escaped, but over 100 of his men were killed or captured, including Seebohm himself, who was mortally wounded. But, the loss of personnel, while significant, was not the disaster. The disaster was the speed of the capture. Lieutenant Hertz, Seebohm's second-in-command, later stated that the speed of the Australian attack meant, quote, methodical destruction of the documents, etc., was no longer possible. The official German history of the Signals Service confirmed that the valuable intercept files, the records of British messages and codes, the analyses of British traffic, and even the German and Italian cipher schedules were captured intact. Rommel, upon hearing the news, reportedly said, "Then it is futsch, lost." He knew immediately that his primary source of tactical intelligence on the British was gone, and he was now fighting blind. Here is where the story takes a turn that offers a deeper lesson about warfare and, the fog of recognition. The Australians who captured Tel El Aissa had pulled off one of the war's great intelligence coups, but they didn't know it. To them, this was just another collection of German vehicles and prisoners. They had no idea they had just dismantled Rommel's personal signals intelligence unit. The non-military appearance of the vehicles, the civilian buses and lorries, worked exactly as camouflage, but not against bombs. It worked against the perception of the soldiers on the ground. The men of the 2nd 24th saw a strange collection of vans. They did not see a high-tech intelligence hub. Consequently, the full value of the captured documents and equipment was not immediately exploited by the 8th Army. It took time for the intelligence apparatus to realize what the infantry had actually bagged. It demonstrated that a signals intelligence unit is only as secure as the infantry holding the ground in front of it. Seebohm's pursuit of better results led him to ignore the tactical reality that his specialized unit could not defend itself against a determined ground attack. He assumed his location behind an Italian division was safe, but the speed and violence of the Australian assault proved otherwise. For the Allies, it was a stark reminder of the importance of sanitizing a battlefield. If you capture a radio intercept unit, you have to secure the site immediately and recognize the value of what you found. For the Germans, it was a catastrophic failure of risk management. The culture of Rommel's command, which rewarded audacity and forward movement, encouraged Seebohm to push his luck past the breaking point. In the broader scope of the war, this was not an isolated incident. On the Eastern Front, the Soviets and Germans were locked in a constant battle of radio detection and counter-detection. The Red Army employed thousands of signalmen, men like Isaac Rotman, a field signalman whose job was to literally crawl across battlefields laying telephone wire, running, walking, and exposing himself to fire simply to keep communication lines open. He survived, but he noted the utter devastation around him and the constant, grinding danger of being the man who connects the command post to the forward line. But it also created a new class of soldier, the radio man, who became a priority target. By 1944, the Allies had developed systems like Joan Eleanor, a high-frequency two-way radio used by OSS agents behind German lines, allowing them to talk briefly and clearly to a high-flying aircraft without spending hours sending vulnerable Morse code. The war became a constant race. Better radios, better codes, better ways to hide the signal, and better ways to find the enemy's signal and put a shell on top of it. The story of the field radio in World War II is not just a story of technology. It's a story about the human decisions that put that technology in harm's way. Captain Seebohm didn't lose his unit because his equipment was poor. He lost it because he made a tactical choice based on professional ambition and a misreading of the immediate threat. The Australians who captured him didn't fail to exploit the intelligence because they were incompetent. They failed because they had no framework for recognizing what they had stumbled upon. In the chaos of combat, the value of a hidden connector is often only visible in hindsight, and that is why we study it, to understand that in war the most vital assets are often the quietest and the easiest to lose. If you value in-depth historical analysis that goes beyond the standard battlefield summaries, consider subscribing to War Machina and sharing this video.